Hello everyone, this is Zeus Trivia. Welcome to our first guide for Total War Troy, where we will take a look at the skill tree for Achilles. Now, I'm currently playing Achilles campaign on the channel, so this will be as much help for you guys as it will be for me. So let's run through the skill tree and highlight some of the key skills I think that will be helpful to your Achilles campaign. And since some of these skills are also shared on some of the generic generals, I hope this will be helpful for all your campaign. So starting from the top, at level 1, we all start out with Vanquish. So Vanquish is an ability that will give you 15 seconds of boost for all units within 40 meters. And that 40 meters is constant in those 15 seconds. What it means is if your unit starts out outside your meter when you activate, if they step into your meter during the duration, they will still get the effects. Basically, the effect is for all units within 30 meters around Achilles, including himself. And all of them will get 50% extra charge bonus and 20% extra speed. This is actually quite useful for charging into the rear or even for your front line or to reposition. It's something that you can spam. And notice how the cooldown is only 40 seconds and there is no rage cost. So it's essentially a free ability that you can activate every 40 seconds. And at worst, it can give you some extra speed, at best 50% extra charge bonus to attack your enemies. So that's a skill we start out at rank 1, which is the free ability. After that, we have 13 levels, up to 14, from 2 to 14. And each of these levels have 2 sides. You can only choose one side. It will automatically lock the other side. And beyond the initial skill that you can pick, you can branch out farther and gain additional bonuses on each side. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1. And in the end, since you need 2 skill points to complete a tier, you're going to need 26 additional skill points, and level 27 happens to be the max level. So basically at max level, you can have every line covered with the tier 2s as well. So starting at the beginning, at level 2, we have a choice between Frenzy and Blood of Hercules. So Frenzy is an ability that you can use on yourself and you start costing health. And it will give you extra damage in terms of weapon damage, 30%. It will speed up your attack by reducing your attack interval by 200%. And it will also reduce your stamina, so it will make you tired by hitting harder in a frenzy mode. And the 10 health cost is pretty significant in my opinion, unless you have something to counteract that, and we'll cover that a bit later. And if you upgrade this, you only have one choice. There's a stamina upgrade. And this will make the health cost into 5. So that's going to reduce your health cost, and also your stamina loss is going to go down to 12%. So it's going to halve your health cost and as well as your stamina cost. So it makes it much better by upgrading it. Blood of Hercules, on the other hand, gives you a boost on yourself for 45 seconds, and the cooldown is 90 seconds. And while this is active, you get 50% melee attack. So melee attack in the game, if we take a look over here, it determines the chance of a successful hit on enemy when the unit is engaged in melee. So it's essentially a hit chance. And for Achilles, we start out at 65. If we boost that by 50%, we'll be at 100%. So we'll get 100% hit rate. Now, of course, you have to factor in the enemy's melee defense, but getting that higher is going to increase your actual damage output because you're going to hit a lot more. And we can boost this farther. There is one version that's battle speed that will give you 25% movement range on top of your 50% melee attack. And there's one that reduces cooldown from 90 seconds to 60 seconds. So of these two, I tend to prefer this speed boost because all the combat is very infantry heavy. Being able to run down your enemy and catch up, or have the speed to redeploy and maneuver around enemy unit is quite powerful. So anytime I see a speed boost, I'm inclined to take it. Having the cooldown, I feel like is not so important, even though this skill is also rage free. So you can actually use Vanquish and this skill as much as you want without worrying about rage. You don't need rage for these skills either, but there is a health cost. So that's kind of our level 2 skill. I tend to favor the Blood of Hercules speed, but that might not be the right build. I still have very limited experience on the game, but that's my first instinct when I see these skills. So moving on to level 3, we have Armed by Hephaestus, which is actually who arms us. We will have the armor upgrade, the shield. Well, the shield's already given to us, but technically this shield is made by Hephaestus as well. And we get a helmet upgrade later on in the game as we complete our epic missions. And when we have that, that's because our mother went to Hephaestus to ask him to craft us a new set of armor after our old set was taken when Patroclus got killed. That's another story. Let's focus back on the guide. So here we get 60 points added to the melee damage, and all the skill is going to increase our hit point, and you can see that reflected on the stats over here. When we hover it, it'll tell us how much damage will actually get increased. So a pretty big boost, 150 after factoring to attack speed and such. And this number can be further improved depending on the type of battle you're in. So you can get additional 50 damage if you're in a siege or choke point battle. And if you're in an ambush or land battle, you get 50 points for the other choice. So it depends on what type of fights you'll be getting into. Now, I don't actually like the variable factors here because you can't really control what type of fights you have to fight. You can slow down and try to force more land fight by ambushing, or you can speed things up by sieging. It just kind of pigeonholes your general into a certain type of battle, and I don't actually prefer that on an epic hero that's our faction leader, who has to be there for all types of battles. The other hand, we get the Way of Ares, and we get +5 to melee attack. So as you can see, melee attack is the hit rate, it's not the actual damage. But if we see the bonuses here, we can gain 100 points to melee damage to heroes against sword units, or 100 points of melee damage of hero against spear unit. So this kind of dictates what type of enemies we'll be fighting. And I think the spear is actually quite nice because a lot of generals use spears. So I feel like this will actually make us a lot stronger against generals. Although it does says unit here, so it could mean only the enemy troops. But spears rule the battlefield in this time period, and they have bonus against large sword and axe. So being able to kill off the enemy spear unit is quite nice as well. So you still get the 100 boost to your melee damage, but only against certain types of unit. Whereas if you combine these, you get 110 points to melee damage, but only the extra 50 when you have certain type of battle. So there is pros and cons to either way, depends on how you plan to play out your game. Getting 60 points up front maybe is the best thing, and then later on when you realize what type of battles you'll be fighting, you could determine this much later. You're not forced to complete an entire branch. You can skip over a tier entirely to move on to the next one. There's no prerequisite. There's only exclusions. Now the Way of Ares, the 5 points of melee attack is actually very luckluster. If you don't have 2 points to get the second tier, I don't think it's actually worth it. So maybe I'm still leaning towards this over here. And then once we figure out what type of battle we're most likely to encounter, my ideal is probably siege and choke points might be more common because we got to take settlements. Whereas land and ambush fight, sure, they happen all the time, but sieges are guaranteed events. Moving on to tier 4, Disciples of Ares or Drill Expert. So Drill Expert is pretty simple. You get +1 rank to all new recruits, and you can get additional plus rank to all two-handed units or two-handed weapon units, or +1 rank to all shielded infantry units. So this is basically +2 rank of the unit of your choice and +1 for all unit type. Or Disciples of Ares, we get 15% charge to all unit, which I feel is very powerful. You basically get better charge speed and charge bonus. And over here, you can further increase that charge percentage for either two-handed units or infantry shielded unit. And I prefer the infantry shielded unit because most of your faction unique unit, except for one, have a shield and everyone's infantry. So getting better charge speed is going to close those gaps better. It's going to have them have higher charge bonus so they can hit harder, whether they were frontal charging or charging from the flank. Drill Expert, it's nice, but you just have to fight to gain experience. This you can't gain in any other manner, right? If you want this bonus of 35% charge, you have to pick it here. So I'm pretty heavily leaning toward Disciples of Ares over here. And on your leader, this army is going to fight quite a bit, so experience is not going to be hard to come by. So I feel like we can give up Drill Experts over here. Moving on to level 5, Famous Hero and Disciplinarian. Famous Hero give us recruitment cost discount, 5% to all, 7% additional to all two-handed weapons, and 7% additional to missile units. So similar to how you can gain rank in other manners, you can get cost savings in other ways or just make more money. And most units take up a lot of food mainly, so this is not really a big issue. This Manarian gives us less attrition to the army in case we are in hostile territory, out at deep waters, or getting siege. We also get 35% income from raiding. And to take this farther, when we're raiding, we can gain additional 7% casualty replenishment. So that's actually really strong in my opinion. Or you can have no movement cost penalties when you raid. I believe raiding costs 50% of your movement. This way it's free. And you also reduce attrition by another 15%. So this is all pretty powerful, especially compared to this side. I feel like rather than saving money, we should be raiding and making money. So I'm leaning towards this replenishment side where we can raid in enemy territory and still gain some replenishment. I feel that's very powerful. And moving on to tier 6, Divine Challenge and Zeus Wrath. So here is a playstyle decision that's actually pretty important. So Divine Challenge is actually forcing an enemy into a duel similar to Three Kingdoms. And you have 45 seconds in this duel to kill the enemy. You can increase that duration all the way up to 90 seconds with this upgrade here, or reduce the enemy's armor by 20 points. So if you prefer the Three Kingdom type of dueling where you can lock the enemy in place and hit them for about 45 seconds using Achilles, this is what's for you. But in this game, if you just have your general run up to the enemy general and fight them, it doesn't lock them into a challenge, but it still creates a very nice dueling environment where the enemy unit won't bother you. So that perhaps would make you not favor Divine Challenge and go for Zeus' Wrath, which would decrease the enemy armor by 50%. Only one enemy and whoever is around them, and you can target them up to 100 meters away. So you can select on enemy, use this ability, select on enemy, and they'll lose half of their armor. And you can make them lose another half of their armor as well as 25 morale if you upgrade the morale bonus here. Now, I don't think the armor actually stack. I think you still lose 50% armor. The additional boost of 25 morale is what's added here, whereas you can add a cooldown decrease. So instead of 120 seconds, you can go for 90 seconds. So out of these, I'm definitely going for morale. We might not get to use it as often, but losing 25 points of morale is huge and can turn the tides of battle. 7. Here's where things get real interesting. I think this is the first tier where I have a clear winner, and that's Bloodthirsty. So Bloodthirsty allow you to gain rage passively. Now so far we didn't see many abilities that require us to use rage, but eventually they will be. And if we can use the rage that we can gain passively rather than have to rely on fights constantly, we can actually supply ourselves a steady amount of rage at all times to be able to use for our abilities. We can improve that by boosting the rage generation of heroes in battle. So it's a passive boost and an actively passive gain. That's weird to say, but basically one allows you to gain it passively at all time, while the other one allows you to gain more of them through methods like fighting or through the method of the passive gain. Now the other side is heavy weapon. On paper, this looks very good. You get 30% to armor piercing damage and also 2.5% to health. That part's very standard. But the armor piercing damage increases your damage by over 200. But if we upgrade it, which we have to basically as we level up, you have to max it out. You will gain the same armor piercing damage, but you will lose attack speed. You gain 1 second to your attack speed, which is a penalty. And look at the damage, it falls right back. So it's not really worth, in my opinion. It's much better to go for this side and pick out some more rage consuming abilities later on. So moving on to level 8, Prayer to Apollo, we have 10% extra missile damage for units in the hero's army. There's not that many good missile units for Achilles' faction. He does have some nice infantry that are shielded, swords, spear, that can charge in, that can hold the line. You do have javelin men, but that's about it. So it's not a heavily range focused army. You can upgrade this to get experience to your missile units. But because you're not going to recruit that many missile units unless you're going for a missile build on Achilles' army, which I don't recommend. You probably don't want prayer to Apollo. You want to pray to Athena instead. You get flat 4% boost to your melee defense for all unit. Seems very useful. Never hurts to get more dodge chance. And then you can improve that to 8% with this bonus here for sword units. So 4 for all plus 8 to sword. And there's a lot of sword units for Achilles over here in terms of his faction unique unit. There's at least 2 of them. And then you get prayer to Athena Siege. This gives you another 5% melee defense for all units during a siege battle. So very useful. All of this side is much more useful to this side for Achilles build. So I think prayer to Athena is where we're going. Then we come to another interesting choice at 9. So on the left side, the collector is something that I typically like in most games. I tend to go for high value, and you get 30% treasure looted post battle. You can get extra influence after battle and double it if you kill off the captives as a post-battle option, or you can just increase the number of captives you capture, which will indirectly increase your replenishment rate. So this side feels like a lot of value, but the other side is much better in my opinion. So here stored we have minus 25% chance of success action of enemy agent action against this hero. This is key because Achilles is your faction leader. The army is going to probably be your best army. It'd be a real shame if the enemy can stall, hurt you, or reduce your morale with their silly common agents and slow down your campaign and put you in a bad situation, especially if you're at war with a lot of factions and you see tons of agents flooding you. This is definitely a common problem in Warhammer games. So I feel like reducing the chance of getting hit by such actions by 25% is going to be a huge boost to your faction. And minus 2 turns of hero spent wounded is also very nice. You don't want to lose Achilles from the battlefield. He doesn't die, but he does get wounded, and you have to wait about 5 turns for him to come back. It's a very long cooldown compared to 3 Kingdoms, which is just 1 turn. So by reducing the turn times hero need to spend wounded, things will be a lot smoother for your campaign. And we can upgrade these to improve our increased chance of critical failure for enemy agent. Critical failures will often injure the agent themselves, take them out of the field, and this will increase that by 15%. Very, very useful to be stacked with a 25% for just receiving the action. And increase the line of sight for the hero's army. Never a bad thing to see enemy reinforcement or enemy allies coming this way. And lastly, 2.5% to hero's hit point. That part's very standard. Alternatively, you can go for reduced upkeep costs for all heroes faction-wide. This is just a food saving mechanic because heroes tend to have about 300-ish supplies of upkeep of food. So reducing that by 15%, depending on how many generals you have, I mean regardless of how many generals you have, I don't think it's worth it, because the best way if you want to save costs is to minimize your armies, because supply lines are actually really punishing. So in a sense, I feel like this is probably not the best choice, and going for line of sight and resistance is probably better. So now we're at level 10, Combat Mastery and Battle Veteran. So Combat Mastery gives us reduced cooldowns on our active abilities, and then this one gives more rage cost discount. And since we're generating raid, I don't think we need this, and because the other side's so much better, I don't even think we need the cooldown. The other side gives us extra hit points, but if you take a look, if you get the regeneration version of Battle Veteran, which you should, you gain passive hit point regeneration to hero, plus 5 HP healed per second. This is actually very big because regeneration for single model units, like the heroes, means you can go back to full health. You can perhaps wait till the battle is over and enemies are routing. Just let them run off screen, wait a little while, and let your general heal to full. And it's just basically a great mechanic for your general. So definitely go for this. And the alternative is add more hit point. So I don't think the max of 15% hit points needed if you can heal your health back. What good does 15% do when you're low health entering into a battle? So moving on to tier 11, we have Terrify and Ari Thunder. Terrify, like the name suggests, reduces morale on enemy unit that's 40 meters away. You can basically select an enemy unit. It does cost 75 rage, so here's where rage comes in, but it does reduce 30 points of morale for 25 seconds, which is huge. So if you want to route units from far away with Achilles, some key choke points perhaps that you got to take with your army, this is always going to come in very useful. And we do have rage taken care of. 75 is quite high rage, but I think we can handle it. And then you can have increased range. Instead of 40 meters away, you can do 80 meters. Or increased melee defense, which means you will drop not only the enemy morale, but also 15 points of melee defense, making them more vulnerable to your attacks, as in it will hit more because melee defense is evasion chance. So I feel like this is pretty good. Just the 30 points of morale is already wonderful. So competing against them is Ari's Thunder, which is also a 75 rage cost ability that instead of reducing morale, we reduce melee defense, so making the enemy impossible to dodge. This is not as good as morale because morale can eventually force some units to retreat, which renders them completely useless, whereas melee defense, you get to hit them a little bit more, but it's not going to change things that dramatically in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion. But you can improve this by also reducing a portion of morale. This makes it slightly more interesting, but I think I'll still go with Terrified because I just have to spend only a single skill point to pick this up, whereas I kind of have to invest this heavily into the second tier, which will reduce armor and reduce melee defense and morale. So that said, let's move on to tier 12, almost done with this list. Thunder Armor and Melee Chariot. So you have a Melee Chariot, right? So you now will enter the battle with chariots, and your chariots will have a nice health pool that you can use. And you can upgrade this to a skirmisher chariot, which I believe will be a slightly lighter chariot, gives it a little bit more speed perhaps. Or you can have the reinforced melee chariot that will give it probably a heavy look, or at least a medium look. The skirmisher chariot also probably give your Achilles some ammo for javelins, while this is purely focused on running units down with your heavy chariot, which I feel like is the way to go. Achilles, although we have seen him throw javelins in pop culture, I feel like having him run down enemy units in the chariot until the chariot is destroyed, because there is a chariot health, and then have Achilles descend on the enemy and killing them is the way to go. This also addresses a lot of the lack of AoE damage and clearing mobs with heroes, because Achilles is really good at killing enemy generals, but is not very good at clearing out mobs, and having a chariot would also help that. Now, competing against the chariot is Thunder Armor. So this is useful. You target yourself, and anyone you're engaged with will lose their armor by 30 points for 10 seconds. So that's actually really strong, but it's competing against a chariot. So in a sense, I feel like most of the time I'm going for chariots. You can upgrade this to also lower the army's missile dodge chance with shield by 75%, which is huge. And you can also reduce their movement so they can't run away. So once they engage you, they can't run away, or once they engage you, they're more vulnerable to your range units. Both useful, but we're going to go with chariots most likely in most of the games. Lastly, we have two more levels here. Level 13, Warrior's Oath and Prayer to Ares. Warrior Oath, we get the upkeep discount to Achilles' elite unit, 10%. And that can be increased for his elite shielded infantry unit by another 10%, or all the two-handed units by 15%. So cost saving once again. I feel like unless your economy is really suffering, there's just other solutions to this problem. So I feel like this is not the way to go, and instead you should go for Prayers to Ares, and you get plus 5% melee attack for all units in this army. Very useful, increase hit chance essentially. And you can also increase that for all the sword units by increasing it by another 10%, or another 5% for all units during siege battle. So 10% for siege battles, or 5% for all most of the time, plus 15% for all sword unit. Since you do have two available sword units that are in your unique unit pool, I feel like going for Prayers to Ares is pretty good. He has a lot of good sword shield unit in the game, and that would synchronize very well. Lastly, we have Cleve and Ares Rage. So Ares Rage is probably worth talking about. It gives us a very unique situation where it will double our weapon damage, which is huge. It will make us unbreakable and make us cause fear. And it will cost 100 rage, so it must be full rage to use this. It will last 45 seconds. But during this time, Achilles is out of control. He's berserk. We can't control him. He'll just kill whatever is closest. And we can extend this to Duration increased to 60 seconds instead of 45, so additional 15 seconds. Or we can keep the 15 seconds increase away and go still for 45, but get 150% weapon damage, as though doubling your damage is not enough. So there is an argument where you could go with Ari's Rage, but then there's another argument saying that Berserk is something that's really bad, because your general could be just chasing this one unit far away, you can't control it, tell it to stop, and then by the time 45 seconds is up, you're all the way across the map, and you can't come back to help your armies. That would be one of the worst situations. So losing control here might not be the best thing, but let's say you're in a duel, or if you've already been fighting this battle and you just need to get through some tough enemies and you want to activate this so you don't rout and you can cause fear and go berserk, do a ton of damage, then this could be the way to go. Conversely, if you don't like losing control of your general, which I personally don't, I tend to go with Cleve here, which will cost 60 rage, last 25 seconds, and it will give you 20 points of melee attack, which increase your hit chance, and it will also increase your armor piercing damage by 20%, which is another very helpful boost. And we can upgrade this into two different branches of stamina and damage. This gives extra damage. If you look at this, we get 35% armor piercing damage instead of 20%, and over here is additional increase to stamina. So that kind of wraps up our skill tree outlook. Most of these skills are not terribly unique. Some of the more interesting ones are stuff like health recovery, battle veteran, bloodthirsty, rage recovery, and then some of the boosts like rating boost seems very interesting. Chariots are obviously very nice. We can have a charging Achilles on a chariot. Can't wait to actually have that in my campaign. So hopefully this overview will help you out in your campaigns, and we'll see you next time when we have another guide for Total War Troy. Until then, bye!